welcome you in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ to this message for Sunday, May 10th. I am glad to be sharing the good news of God's love with you, and today we are continuing this sermon series, What is saving your life right now? This is a question posed by Barbara Brown Taylor in her book, An Altar in the World. And the idea behind answering this question is to find ways to align our lives with God's love, body, mind, and spirit. So every week we've been looking at a spiritual practice or an ordinary practice of life that could become an opportunity for alignment, for salvation to take place in our lives. And so today we are looking at walking on the earth. And one of the images she uses in the book is walking barefoot, so you can really feel the earth. And today we have a symbol with us here, and it is a walking stick. This is made by Eldon Wilson, a friend from Bend, Oregon. As we were leaving, I was leaving the church in Bend, Oregon to come to Batavia. He made this walking stick, and it was really a nice gift, a reminder of the bond we share and of God being our shepherd. It's a symbol of the shepherd, and of course there's the symbolism of pastoring as shepherding. And so today I want to invite us to look at the practice of walking, and knowing that a lot of us are doing a lot of walking, more so these days because of the pandemic. Not a lot of places to go, but walking has been really a gift that's been saving our lives literally, in terms of being able to go out and enjoy nature. Now, if you are unable to walk for whatever reason, because of injury or age or challenges that you may have, I hope you will still find value in focusing on this gift, because we can also imagine being able to walk, and we can imagine our movement from one place to another to be that act of walking. And so today we're looking at two stories. One story comes from the book of Exodus about Moses walking, and the second story is about two disciples after the crucifixion of Jesus who were walking away from Jerusalem to a town called Emmaus. I'm putting two stories together. I normally don't do that, but I really like to highlight the difference between the one experience of walking versus the other. That second experience of not paying attention while really being mindful in the first walk. And so the first story is about Moses. Moses became the leader of the Israelites, helping them get out of slavery in Egypt. What his story tells us, though, is that life was not always easy for him. In fact, at this moment when he had this special encounter with a burning bush with God, he had been at a very low point in his life. He was living as a fugitive, if you will. He had to leave Egypt because of the oppression of the Egyptians, and he had tried to help a Hebrew man against an Egyptian man, and then he ended up killing the Egyptian man, so he had to flee for his life. Now, from the beginning of his life, there was always this threat of violence. The two midwives that were ordered to kill all male children in Egypt, they refused the order of Pharaoh. But then the sister and the mother of Moses had to devise a plan to save his life. So all along there was this threat, and this was a low point for him. He had settled in the desert. He had found a wife and was working for his father-in-law as a shepherd. So he was out doing what he would normally be doing every day, but he was paying attention. And so here's the reading from Exodus 3, first 6 verses. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight, and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then God said, Come no closer, remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. It's an incredible experience, and it's a very famous story for the obvious beautiful imagery in it of seeing a bush that was ablaze but not being consumed by the flames. And biblical scholars have discovered a plant, such a plant. It is called the gas plant. That's kind of the common name for us. And I guess the more scientific name, Dictaminus albus. And so it's a plant that exudes this inflammable kind of vapor, and under certain circumstances of dry, heat, and cloudiness, it could catch on fire, but without being consumed. In fact, if you go online, you'll see people lighting a match close to this kind of plant, and it lights up. It lights up. And so what's interesting about this for me, discovering this plant and knowing what Moses was seeing was really a natural scene, but caught his attention. It was unusual, but he was paying attention to it. And whether he was really in that prepared place to encounter God or not, something really spoke to him through that plant. And it opened his senses to perceive God speaking to him. He was the one to help save the people of Israel out of slavery. He was the one to be called to go back and speak truth to power to Pharaoh, who had enslaved these people for a long time. The people of ancient Israel at that point had been in slavery for over 400 years. So this was not an easy task. So this was an incredible encounter. Moses sees a vision through this incredible plant, and then listens to a voice speaking to him. And then he gets directions to go back, and he grasps for certainty, of course, in the midst of it as the story goes on. But the whole point in this for us today is to see how he paid attention. When he turned aside, when he said, I'm just going to get off the path of tending the sheep and doing what I'm normally doing, and I'm going to walk more intentionally. I'm going to walk closer to this. I'm going to get a sense of what's really going on. And so, to me, that's an incredible gift. That's an incredible moment. A reminder of how paying attention could open up a doorway to the sacred for us. Now, on the opposite side of things is a story of two disciples. One is named Cleopas, and they were leaving Jerusalem after the crucifixion of Jesus. They had heard the stories about potential resurrection, but they were devastated. They didn't believe them. And they were walking in despair. They left the ministry. They had hoped that Jesus was going to be the one they had been waiting for. But it wasn't so in their minds. So they were walking away. And Jesus comes and walks alongside of them. And they miss it. So let's listen to this story. And this is from Luke 24. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. So it's a good walk. and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were walking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. That's a really incredible statement. Their eyes were kept from recognizing him. Have you walked by something and you just totally missed it? We all have had those experiences where we didn't pay attention. We knew we had a sense, but then we just didn't pay attention. And he said to them, this is Jesus saying to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still and looked sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "Things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the third day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive." So they heard the witness, they heard everything, but they were still not believing it. They couldn't take that in. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him. Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe that all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. Now, again, this is a long conversation. This was not just a moment they missed. A conversation, a long walk, and they still missed it. Then, as they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" Were not our hearts burning within us? Because they were just not expecting something important to happen. They just couldn't see it. Even though they experienced Jesus, they talked to him, they were numb. They were in that place. And we can relate to this experience. I know when you're prepared, when you're saying, "Okay, now I'm going to pray, I'm going to go on a retreat," you're in that place of opening your heart to God. You're expecting something to happen. But when you're walking in your ordinary life, when you're doing the ordinary things of life, when you're feeling the numbness of this moment, of the pandemic and the length of it, now 2 months, it is hard to feel open, to feel alert, to be in that place. I am ready. I'm going to see the sacred today. It is more like what the 2 disciples experienced, not more like Moses. Moses was in a difficult spot too, but he was more alert. And maybe it's because he was walking on a mountain, like in a place where people would have traditionally expected to have a vision. Maybe it was because of the bush. Whatever the circumstances are, there's a difference between the 2 walks. One was mindful, aware, alert, open, and the other was closed, fearful, sad, deep in that place of not knowing what was going to happen, in that place of uncertainty, and really not seeing in front of them what was right in front of them. So I want to invite us today to consider walking more like Moses, opening your heart, opening your mind, blessing the ordinary moments of walking that you have. And walking on the earth could become something that would connect you to the power of the ordinary moment to become sacred. So whether you're walking to the kitchen or walking outside or walking to work or wherever you might be walking, you can take that time to really be mindful. Each step could become an opportunity, a doorway to the sacred. Now, the best way, I would think, in terms of becoming mindful when we're walking, or maybe one of the best ways, is to really walk where we detach, as Barbara Brown Taylor says, we detach the journey from the destination. Because when we're walking to get to somewhere, oftentimes our minds are focusing on what's happening next, or maybe where we were. And so she invites us to really, in order to be able to walk mindfully, is to detach the walking from the destination. She says this is in fact one of the best ways to recognize the altars you are passing right by all the time. Most of us spend so much time thinking about where we have been or where we are supposed to be going that we have a hard time recognizing where we actually are. When someone asks us where we want to be in our lives, the last thing that occurs to us is to look down at our feet and say, "Here, I guess since this is where I am." And to think about that, to consider the power of really detaching the journey from the destination. Now, there are many ways of doing this. One is to just take a few steps, set for yourself a spot, whether it's in your house or outside, and to just walk in circles, but just slowly or back and forth. Maybe 15, 20 steps, that's all it takes. And just doing that slowly and mindfully, without really analyzing it, without just feeling it. Let that be a meditation. One of the practices people have used throughout the centuries is walking in the path of a labyrinth. Some of you might have experienced that. It's a really powerful reminder of just letting the labyrinth be. It's like a maze, but you don't get lost in it, and it follows a path, and you walk it. And then as you walk it, you are able to let go and to open to God. And oftentimes people have incredible revelations during those times. It becomes a metaphor for your life. And so how do you walk a labyrinth? I want to invite you to look at some online resources. Here are a couple of websites or YouTube videos where you could look at them. People have used rope or tape. You could use anything to create a labyrinth in your own space. Now, if you can't, as I said, if you can't walk, if you're in a wheelchair or on crutches or unable to walk, you can just imagine the sense of movement, or maybe just put your feet on the ground in a mindful way. And so what we're going to do is close with a time of reflection on a walk you've taken this week. Let something come to your mind, a time you walked this week, or you moved from one spot to the next. And on average, a person walks about 12 miles a week. That's not counting exercise. And so just find a few steps from those times and let the Holy Spirit bring that to your attention. And so I want to invite you to center yourself. Maybe close your eyes and imagine yourself going through that walk slowly, or that movement. Pay attention to the details around you. The smells, the sounds, the sensations. Imagine just like Moses, you took your shoes off when you noticed how sacred that moment was. Now, as you see yourself walking, listen to these words from 2 Corinthians 5. For we walk by faith, not by sight. For we walk by faith, not by sight. Imagine that walk you took. No matter where it is, your home, a hospital, a workplace, a park, or just down the street. How did you move by faith? How aware were you of all that was around you? How aware were you of the sacred as your feet touched the holy ground of that time and place? Don't judge those movements. Just take a moment now to imagine yourself barefoot in that spot, pausing and feeling the earth beneath you. And repeat within your spirit these words: I walk by faith, not by sight. I walk by faith, not by sight. Oh God, we thank you for the gift of walking, the gift of movement, as a way to remember that we belong to you and that every moment, every place is full of your glory, of your presence, of the sacredness of life. Help us to see this walk as a metaphor for life, so that we may walk by faith and not by sight. Amen.